Dearest Jessica, firstly, I think we should acknowledge how exquisitely tan I look. I am significantly less like a ghost. Secondly, and most importantly, I have another book to share with you. So this book is called Ruby on the Outside, and it's by Nora Rayleigh Baskin. And this is a book that's probably meant for, I'd say, anywhere from 6th to 8th grade. It definitely has a voice that would appeal to that age group, but it covers a very dense topic that probably 11 to 13-year-olds might not typically encounter, and that has to do with Ruby, who is 10 years old, having to visit her mother on a weekly basis, who is in prison. So before I even get into the contents of this book, I just wanted us to acknowledge how awesome this cover design is. So go you, person who designed this cover. I really like the vertical lines, which suggest this implication of prison bars, but it has a lot of fun colors to it. Like, it's just like neon and lime green and yellow, and it doesn't have that dreary implication of what America's prison system is, which is probably any of the 9 circles of hell. Also, that probably wasn't an appropriate comment for a book review, but I'm probably going to keep it in this video. So right away in chapter 1, we get to see how Ruby struggles with having this personal life on the outside of the prison, as well as her personal life inside the prison. She's about 5 or 6 years old, and she's getting to visit her mom in prison, and she goes up to one of the guards and she says, "Hey, when is my mom coming home? She's been saying that she's coming home soon for a really long time, but when exactly is that?" And the guard kind of just laughs at her, which is so terrible because she's like 6 years old. Then for most of the other chapters that follow after chapter 1, we get to see some element of Ruby either visiting her mom or talking about visiting her mom. So I think this book does a really good job of having 2 distinct worlds that constantly collide with each other. Here's Ruby trying to make friends, trying to transition into being a middle schooler the summer before middle school, and no one outside of the prison knows that her mom is incarcerated. So that's really hard, and I imagine that must be something that kids also experience outside of this fictional world. So like in the real world, I imagine that a lot of kids either don't talk to their friends about it, or they don't have friends who would understand the situation to begin with. And having a parent in prison sounds so unbearably difficult. Like, how is a kid supposed to even have a life outside of their parent being in jail? And that's one of the conflicts that Ruby faces. Actually, I'd argue that it's the main conflict that she faces, is trying to have her individual personality outside of her mom being in prison. I think Baskin does a pretty good job of gradually revealing information throughout this book. So Ruby doesn't immediately bog us down with all these details about her mom being in prison. She just gives us little tidbits throughout the chapters, and we slowly, as readers, realize why her mom is in prison. And it's not necessarily because her mom did anything wrong. She was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, she kind of did something wrong, and that kind of something wrong was leaving her child unattended in the middle of the night to go with her abusive husband, to go rob a convenience store, and then someone got killed, and then she stayed behind. So, guilt by association-ish. So not only does this book tackle how hard it is to have a parent in prison, but how hard it is to have a parent in prison who is wrongfully imprisoned. So even though this is a really dense topic, this book does a good job of revealing information on an age-appropriate basis. So it doesn't get into, information about court or information about how gruesome the event was that caused Ruby's mom to be imprisoned. It more so talks about Ruby's response to her mom being in prison. The biggest relationships that impact Ruby's life are the relationship she has with her mother, with her Matu, and with her new best friend, Margaret. So Matu is actually her aunt, and she substitutes as a second mom, hence the name Matu. So Margaret is the girl next door who just recently moved in, and Margaret and Ruby end up having summer camp together. But as the story progresses, we find out that maybe Ruby and Margaret's lives might have overlapped in the past. and that's going to cause even more conflict as Ruby decides whether or not she's going to tell Margaret that her mom is in prison. And this would be the first time that she would be telling someone that her mom's in prison. So probably the most satisfying part of this book was when Ruby finally revealed to her mother that she was upset and angry that her mom is in prison. So most of the time during the visits, Ruby would just talk about the highlights, the good things that are going on in her life. Like, oh yeah, I just made a new friend. Or, yeah, I'm doing really well in school. I'm keeping up with homework. Everything's going great. But I like that Ruby was finally pushed to her breaking point and she actually displayed emotion. Not that she wasn't displaying emotion beforehand in the book, but it was very much more in her head. I think this finally broke down the wall between her two realities so that Ruby on the outside and Ruby on the inside of prison could function together as one person. And at the end of the book, Ruby does actually start telling people that her mom is in prison. Sorry, that's kind of a spoiler, but I think it's really healthy because then it shows that this is a normal part of Ruby's life and she has to accept it. And it does define her to an extent. It's an aspect of who she is, but she is not her mother's imprisonment. So since that was my favorite part of the book, I found a passage that I actually wanted to read to you. I'm angry. I'm so angry. It's not going to work. My mother ruined my life and it's only going to get worse. The first best friend I've ever had is going to find out who I really am. She's going to find out what my mother did. Sooner or later, she's bound to find out. And then she'll hate me forever and I didn't even do anything. And even if Margaret never finds out, I'll know. I'll know that I'm lying to my best friend every day. So the biggest conflict that I had with the book was the ending of the book. So I'm going to talk about that right now. So if you want to hear about that, well then thanks a lot, Jessica. But then also, you should skip to like the end of the video or something. So the problem with the ending of this book is that it completely resolves a plot hole. And I actually would have liked it if the story had gone in a completely different direction. But the direction that it chose is this one. So what happened is that Margaret Tip is the name of the next door neighbor, and Tips is the last name of the victim who died in the convenience store shooting, which led to Ruby's mom getting arrested. So Tips, not really that common of a last name. Maybe if it was like Smith or Johnson or Jones. Okay, but Smith and Jones are really lame in terms of last names, but if it was something like more common like that, then I would buy it. Then I would be totally fine with it. But it's Tips. Tips it's not that common of a last name. But apparently, Margaret and the victim of the convenience store shooting have the same last name. And guess what? Margaret also had a dead brother whose name is Josh Tips. And Josh Tips is the name of the convenience store kid who was killed. And I'm like, okay, then clearly they're related. No, they're not. So Ruby will worry this whole time that Margaret is not going to be best friends with her anymore because she'll find out that her mom shot her brother and her brother is dead because of her mom. But that's not the case. Because even though also Margaret just happened to live really close to where Ruby used to live, it doesn't matter because there's no connection there. And I'm like, dang it, Baskin, like why didn't you actually just make it where Ruby's mom killed Margaret's brother? I feel like that would have been so much more interesting and that could have been like this better conflict of like realizing that no, the child is solely the victim whenever a parent does a crime or gets arrested or something like that. And it would be like this huge plot about forgiveness and stuff like that. So like I was waiting for that for like half of the book that I just threw over there. But guess what? Nope, not the case. So then like 10 pages from the ending, it's like, haha, actually no. Margaret Tips, you are not related to Josh Tips. That was a different Josh Tips. Haha. So yep, that was Ruby on the Outside by Nora Rayleigh Baskin. And overall, I guess I would recommend the book, though I would obviously cut out the last 10 pages and rewrite the ending because I'm sure I can do that. Also, before I completely forget, the whole reason I wanted to do a book review about this book is because one of the kids in my camp whose name I cannot reveal because that would be breaking a federal law. So this kid actually has a parent who's in jail, and I want to like give this book to this child, but I don't think I can because then that comes across as really creepy. So I just wish that I was this kid's English teacher and I could be like, hey, read this for silent sustained reading, but I can't. But I don't know, I feel like if this kid read this book, it would help him out a lot, even though it's a he and this protagonist is a she. I don't know, can boys read books with female protagonists? I don't know. Anyway, I guess I hope I hear from you soon, Jess, and I hope you're doing well. And maybe I'll see you sometime before the summer ends, but also probably not because I'm too busy at functions, so it was nice knowing you.